Whoops, really? That's what I thought. Sticky. Why are you going 40 miles an hour in the
totally
interstate?
felt that for half my life.
Because your sister told you that. Because it might stick. Yeah, and then you ran over. Oh my God.
40 years. Zero ways on purpose. Yeah, because I kept thinking all the
You can't tell the difference between paid and unpaid.
Yes, that's right. We didn't have an attorney. We didn't have his name to say it first. One day it snowed. I think everybody got out of the road. There were cars off the road. And
This is it.
it didn't stick.
We ready?
We're ready to start. We have 5 members.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the March 25th, 2013 Planning Commission. We have a set of 7 items on the agenda, 2 items on consent. First is the approval of the minutes, and then administrative item ADM 13-4354. Is there any commissioner that would like to? Oh, okay. Pull this off and for discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Sir.
we do have a presentation of a service award.
I just saw that, so
okay.
I don't know how you want to handle that,
Yeah.
Andrew.
We have Don Marr, Chief of Staff, here to present a service award.
Wow, I get to go before your consent or administrative approval. That's great. Tonight, I wanted to come in on behalf of the mayor and the city council and pass along our appreciation for one of your fellow commissioners who will be ending their term here on the commission. Matthew Cabe, he's crying already up there, joined the commission in April of 2007 and is serving through this quarter, March 2013. While we're not always in attendance at your meetings, we tend to watch them. We have such an interesting life upstairs, but we watch the meetings, and one of the things that has been impressive upon us is the sense of humor that Matthew brings to the meeting, his provided insight as an architect from years of service in both public and private development. The fact that he's been an independent thinker and not afraid to voice his opinion or make tough decisions, whether he's been in the majority or the minority. He served as the chair of the commission for a year, and during Matthew's term has had quite a lot of projects and decisions made by this commission. Just to remind him as he kind of sits here tonight and thinks about his term, multiple cell tower approvals, the South Pass Plan zoning development, the Downtown Design Overlay District Standards, Walker Park Neighborhood Master Plan, the City Plan 2030, the Fayette Junction Master Plan, accessory dwelling units, ordinance, urban residential design standards, form-based zoning districts, the cottage development ordinance, the streamside protection ordinance, the mobile vending and sidewalk vending ordinances, and the Fayetteville High School project, as well as several large student housing projects. So I think you can think back on your term and know that you've had a significant hand in some very major development in the city and some major ordinances that will shape our city to come for the future. So as a small token of appreciation, something you can look at and on Monday at 5 when you leave office, knowing you don't have to come here, is a plaque here that says, in appreciation of your dedication and service to the city of Fayetteville, Matthew Cabe, Planning Commissioner, April 2007 to March 2013. So thank you. Thank you.
So we've banished him to the end by himself tonight.
You only need one down here.
Okay. So on consent, we had the approval of the minutes from the March 11th, 2013 meeting, and then the administrative item 13-4354. Do I have any motions?
Mr. Chair,
Sir.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
And Mr. Chair, I'll second, although I didn't know if you wanted to call for public comment on either of those before we, if any. Do we not do that?
No.
Only if the commissioner pulls it off?
Yeah.
I asked if anybody
When you're
wanted
done,
to.
I'd like to make a suggestion too. Maybe that we call roll and
Oh, okay.
so we get who's here.
Yeah.
Roll call. Roll call.
Roll call.
Second, anyway.
Mr. Gardner, will you please call the roll? Or are you doing it, Quinn?
Yeah.
I apologize.
I'm serving as Andrew's left hand
Okay.
tonight, so I'll be calling the rules. Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes. Here.
Lunch, Noble, Cabe,
Present.
Hoskins, Chesser,
Here.
Pennington,
Here.
Anchel.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Motions.
So we had a first. Cook.
I'll second.
No.
I think
Oh, you want a
actually-
re-motion?
Well, I don't know.
No, we're fine. I think we're fine.
We really got this off to the.
Next.
Mr. Chair, just in case, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
And we had a second.
Yep.
Cook now. Okay, we've switched it. Good. Okay. Ready for the roll call?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Call the roll. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Cabe,
Yes.
Chesser,
Yes.
Pennington,
Yes.
Honchel.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We'll get this going. One item of old business is preliminary plat for Gully Road in Oakland, Zion. Is the applicant here? Or, no, Andrew,
Yep.
your job.
The commission heard this item at your previous planning commission
Right.
meeting, and I won't give a full staff report because that was presented at the last meeting. The main item that was left for discussion and more information was street connectivity and a street stub out to the south. And staff was recommending an assessment for that street stub out. And we still are recommending an assessment for the street stub out. And the applicant has provided an updated cost estimate for that connection to the south. And I've placed a copy of that email there in front of you. And the total cost estimate now is $84,880, and that was provided just today. So it was a little bit more than what was presented at the agenda session. And staff is recommending that half of the assessment, the on-site assessment, be paid by the developer, and the other half be paid by the property owner directly to the south, feeling that this is an on-site improvement required of this development is different than like an off-site bridge assessment or something like that. In addition, we feel like the feasibility of actually having that connection built is a lot greater if you actually just divide it between the two properties it directly touches. And we feel like that does meet the legal test of the rational nexus, but certainly the impact of vehicles traveling on it, and also the rough proportionality given the number of lots and the amount of traffic generated by this development, that paying half of that assessment is appropriate. And with that, we're recommending approval of the subdivision, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you. Is the applicant available? If you would, please state your name and tell us about the project.
Jared Inman with Jorgensen and Associates. We'll start out with the easy one. The required sidewalk at the final plat, we're still looking to we want to bond that, so we wouldn't be installing that at final plat, just due to the fact that again, a third of each one of those lots would get ripped out with the driveway, so it just makes sense to not have to waste money or concrete and sidewalk just to rip it out. The assessment for the creek crossing, Glenn, do you have that? Can you pull up that exhibit with those 5 pieces of property? I think it had a percentage cost estimate on it, on the top right corner. It was in the staff report. the reason we don't think we need this cost estimate to begin with, for one, parcels A, D, and E will all have to cross a creek if those parcels get developed. There will be at least one crossing on those parcels. With the stream side protection ordinance, we'd like to minimize the crossings. And if we put a crossing here and there was one for sale on parcel A, we'd have one 300 feet away or a few hundred yards away from each other. 2 crossings. Also, Glenn, can you pull up that spreadsheet that was on that zip drive? Another reason, we did come up with $84,880 on the new cost assessment for the crossing, and I apologize for the late notice on that. It was 60. We did add dirt numbers in there per request, which added 20 grand to it. We are currently looking at $52,525 of off-site improvements. And when I say off-site improvements, that includes the Gully Old Wire intersection, as well as we are having to put curb and gutter on the west side of Oakland Zone, and also on the east side of Oakland Zone, right there were those parcels to the north of that. We're putting curb in front of those parcels. And that comes out to $52,000 roughly. That's an estimate. Whether it be 50% of that assessment, whatever the Planning Commission would decide upon, 30% like we proposed, we feel like we're doing so much off-site improvement that we feel like we shouldn't even be assessed the creek crossing. And if you have any questions, developers here, I'm here. I'll let y'all discuss.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody from the public to speak on this? If you could, come up and state your name.
My name is Colleen Gaston. I live at 3270 Rom Orchard Road, which is fairly close to this subdivision. And I don't have a position on this subdivision. I just have some questions that I couldn't ascertain the answers to by looking at the documents that were available online. And those have to do with what type of wastewater treatment system is going to be utilized, because the staff memo refers to it as a septic system. But then elsewhere in some of the county documents, it refers to a drip dispersal system. And I guess my question primarily is, where is that going to be located? And this is a good diagram to look at to perhaps have someone answer that question.
Okay.
Well,
that's we'll get that answered for you.
And the reason I'm curious about this is you can see the big blue line, the creek. That's a major tributary of Mud Creek. You all are familiar with the fact that Mud Creek has a part of our new trail system along the creek. And so I think it's very important that the quality of the water in that creek be preserved as much as possible. And so I, again would ask that you take a look at to where the whatever wastewater treatment system is going to be utilized for this subdivision, that it be appropriately cited. And I know that's not your determination, that goes to the Department of Health and Department of Environmental Quality. But I think it would be helpful for you to know where that's going to be located in relation to the other improvements on the site, and perhaps have some suggestions on that.
Okay.
So that's my only request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? Could please state your name?
Bob Shepard. Yeah, the idea of not being assessed any portion of this, to me, didn't sound appropriate. I don't think taxpayers want to build bridges or developments that are, it's primarily contained in that area for the benefit of those subdivisions. So I think it would be appropriate that you stick with the requirement of sharing a cost. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. I guess I'll start just real quick and help Ms. Gaston. get some answers very quickly. Glenn, you started to make a comment on that. Would you
Yes, sir.
care to talk to that?
I can respond to some degree on the sanitary sewer system. The applicant, it is a more or less a gravity system. Requirement is that all the individual homes are collected into a gravity system. They have a pump station in its location, and it's pumped back up to this area where it'd be treated, and basically a septic field. And the applicant may be able to go in more detail on the specifics on the permitting for that type of. It's in the county, so that's more or less the proximity of the creek. Obviously, it's a little further away. There are some areas here, but they were trying to avoid the sensitivity here. Instead of in the low spot, they've actually added cost by putting a pump station to pump it up here to another location.
Okay. And I don't have anything else. That's does that answer your question adequately?
It does, other than it says septic system, and I don't think it could be a septic system for this large development.
If you,
Go ahead.
I say that's the permitting process. The applicant has submitted to the health department. I'm not sure exactly the terminology for the package plant and the septic field, but if you want the applicant to provide additional information, you may request that.
Well, we'll let the questions run through the other commissioners, and then we'll just try to bring you up with if we need you for other questions, we'll just bring you all at once up here. Okay. Any questions, comments?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Chesser.
The only concern I have at this point is I went one way on the sidewalks the last time, and I'm a little torn about it now. Given the proximity of this development to the city, I expect that at some point it will become part of Fayetteville proper. At which point I would want us to have sidewalks that were up to code with city standards. And normally, I think the applicant actually makes a compelling argument that the sidewalks be bonded for because of the damage that could occur to them during construction of the individual homes. On the other hand, because this is not going to be looked at again by any city official, I'm not sure how we guarantee that the sidewalks actually get, I'm sure the sidewalks will be built, but there's no way to ensure that they'll be built to a standard that the city might want to inherit one day. And I'm not sure what the solution to that is, because in general I agree with the applicant that laying sidewalk that's then just immediately going to get torn up for a driveway apron does not make any sense. If staff has any advice on that, I'd love to hear it. If not, it may be that the lesser of two evils, probably in my opinion, is that we get the potential for, not necessarily, but the potential for slightly subpar sidewalks rather than, I think it's very wasteful to lay them and then just to tear them out again. That was the one concern I had from last time. I will say that staff has quite convinced me that it's probably appropriate to assess for the bridge, for half the bridge in this set of improvements, because I view the stub out as a connectivity issue, and I think that regardless of what may happen in the future, we don't want that lack of connectivity in that location, and I think the way to ensure that that doesn't happen is to assess for the bridge at this time. Having them pay the full cost just because the creek happens to fall entirely on in their parcel, I don't think is quite fair, given that it's so close to the edge, but I think 50% is fair. That's all my comments for now.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Cook.
I agree with Mr. Chesser, actually 100% on the sidewalks and also on the assessment. I think the sidewalks, there is no solution there. I mean, we can't, no matter which way we go, we can't guarantee anything because we just don't have the authority. But I think it's crazy to go ahead and build them now. I mean, I think we should go ahead and let them move forward without and bond them and try to get the best we can later on. And I agree on the assessment. I think we want the connectivity. It's part of our policies, if you will. That's part of our desire, certainly at the city level, to have as much connectivity now and in the future. And I think we need that bridge, because we know it's going to eventually develop out whichever direction that is. I want to say south, but that's not south. But and I think we should assess half of that now. So,
okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair, I did have, I guess, if I could address Ms. Gaston's question real quickly as a non-professional, but as someone who used to be in this field, I suspect that in general, this type of system that's not being connected to city sewer is technically classified as a type of septic system, even though it's not what you think of as having individual septic tanks for individual houses. The applicant is certainly in a much better position to answer that for me. And I see you're shaking your head a little bit in that maybe you're seeing that there's a different classification in general. So that was my suspicion, but it may be that the chair might ask for the applicant for a better clarification of that, which I would love to hear too, Mr. Chair, if you would entertain that.
Leading up to that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hoskins.
I got a question for staff. Quinn, is there, if we're to allow the applicant to bond for the sidewalks, can we put a trigger in place that the applicant does like we have to do when we're building houses within the city, and that is call for a sidewalk inspection prior to occupancy of the house?
Yeah, no, there's no way for the city to enforce something like that in the county.
Okay. All right. That's all I had.
That's it.
Shucks.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner King.
I tend to agree with the previous comments from the commission, but at agenda session, it was mentioned putting a time limit on this bridge assessment, kind of along the lines of what's typically done in an off-site assessment. It seems reasonable to ask them to pay for part of that connection, but it does seem a little heavy-handed to me anyway for us to hold on, or the city to hold the money indefinitely. And so I encourage whoever is making the motion to suggest a time limit for that. I'll just throw that out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I ask the city attorney a question? What's our staff, what's our normal time limit on that? Is it 5 years?
I think it's 5 years.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Mr. Chair, can I address that? If it's an off-site assessment, the Unified Development Code has a 5-year time frame. For something like this, which is an on-site assessment, there's nothing in the code that addresses that. It basically just, it's an assessment. They're actually paying the city for the improvement, to do the improvement. And it typically wouldn't, be returning the money in any sort of time frame, but as the city attorney mentioned at your agenda session, he did say he felt like there was, the commission would have the legal authority to have some sort of a time frame in which the city could reevaluate the dollar amount and potentially return it. So I think if the commission chooses, they could come up with some sort of a time frame.
I felt this was so close to an off-site development because it's a development on property they cannot use to make a connection south of the creek for other developers. So even though it technically is not an off-site development, I thought maybe the spirit of what the code says for the time limit for off-site developments, you all could apply that in this case.
Okay. And I do have a question, I guess for staff, because the way that under your conditions for approval for this project, item number 3, for the sidewalk, I don't know if it's sidewalk improvement, but it's bullet point 4, the internal streets, and then you have in there, you mentioned the build out of the sidewalks to be constructed, not guaranteed prior to final plat. So what's being proposed or what's being talked about right now, if I'm understanding correctly, are we trying to bond that? Is that?
Yeah, I think what I've heard from the commission, you know, from Commissioner Chester and Commissioner Cook tonight was that they felt that the sidewalks could be bonded as if they were in the city.
Okay.
Staff is not recommending that, so if you do choose, whoever makes the motion
We'll need to
would
amend
like
it.
to have them be bonded, just say, yeah, on condition of approval number 3, finding that the sidewalks can be bonded or guaranteed.
Okay. And if nobody else had any other questions, I'd like to bring the applicant back up if he'd like to talk about the septic system.
Yes, the septic system is pretty much what Glenn said. It's going to have a pump station down there below lot 31, and it's going to come back up to 44 to another, I don't really want to say pump station, but it'll be pumping into a septic field. And I can get Ms. Gaston more information on it. I can get you contact information after this meeting. Get with our septic designer and get you a little bit more information on what exactly all that entails. But that's fine.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll bring you back up if we have any other questions for you. And Ms. Gaston, or
I've got a quick question for staff. Sure. The street improvements, the street improvements are to city standards, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that does include street lighting as well?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
On some of these, on the street improvements, we've worked with the county, and like typically the city wouldn't recommend, you know, curb on both sides of the street, the offsite improvements, but some of it's tweaked a little bit to be so the county and the city would be on the same page on all of it, as far as the way the streets go, and like likely some of the minor design features of like curbing or curb bump outs and things like that. We'll work with the county to make sure their road crews are okay with how it's actually built and constructed.
So the conditions of approval you have in here will allow you to work with the county to...
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still within the ballpark of city code.
In this case, the street lighting would have to be installed as private lighting though, wouldn't it? And maintained by a POA or something?
Right, the city would not, that's correct.
Okay.
The city would not be maintaining the lights.
Okay, so the city and county would see that it was installed, but they would not see that it's maintained?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
it.
Okay. Ms. Gaston, did you have another question?
Thank you. My first concern was that this not be, whatever it is, not be located too close to the creek. But my second concern is I still don't know what type of system it is. And what I do know about these type of developments, though, is that it's not a septic system, and it's not, it is going to involve some sort of wastewater treatment package plant. And it is probably going to involve a drip dispersal irrigation field that's going to take a certain amount of land. And so I would just like to know for certain that there is a plan and that appropriate amount of land has been set aside in, I guess, what's being called Lot 44. And so I assumed that would have been part of the submission so that the city could determine that there was appropriate space in this development for sufficient wastewater treatment. But now I'm not certain that that's actually happened, that the city has that information.
Glenn, do you?
The information that I'm aware of, since it is in the county, is not connected to the city's sewer system, that our requirement is ultimately they'll have a package plant design, meeting the code, pull all the permits, and that once they go through that design process, just like final construction drawings, that's when that will be determined.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to point out as well that at final plat, the state health department actually will have to sign the plat, and they'll typically give us a letter of subdivision approval and a letter of approval of the community wastewater septic system. So that's really checked by the state at this type of a system. It's not something that the city or even the county reviews in detail.
Okay. Does that help? Okay. Okay, and the only other question, Mr. Shepard mentioned he wanted to make sure that there was some kind of assessment that the applicant was going to pay.
I think he was a little confused on that when he said that he didn't want the city to be building this. The assessment is to be used with another developer to pay, who would be developing south of the creek. that would also benefit from crossing the creek. And so the assessment, the other 50% would not come from city taxpayers, but would come from another developer, is what would be anticipated.
Okay, I just wanted to get some clarification on that. Okay, any other comments?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Winston?
Especially with you.
considering that this development is not required to provide for tree preservation or parkland dedication, being outside the city limits, I find it's appropriate for there to be some extra assessment for the bridge, and also that it is a benefit to that particular development in the future. I don't know how long it's going to take for there to be a development to the south. I'd like to give it a little bit more than 5 years. And so
I would say you can't take into account that they're not having tree preservation areas or anything else like that. That's simply not, something that you can take into account.
I just recognize that it isn't part of it, and
I would just say, please don't take that into account one way or the other.
I rescind my my comment that I'll not talk about that. Okay. So I'm going to move to approve preliminary plat 13-4312. Getting over here, finding in favor of determination for variance of to allow a block length of 833 feet. On number 2, a determination of appropriate street connectivity requiring a assessment for a bridge to the south of $42,440 to be held for 8 years. On number 3, regarding street improvements, agreeing with staff's recommendations on all points except for the 4th regarding sidewalks, where sidewalks are allowed to be bonded instead of built at preliminary plat, and also let's see, staff's recommendation regarding street lights. Just make sure that's in there. I think that does it.
Second. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd actually like to offer an amendment to that proposal, given the chance.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Not taking into account things like parkland or anything, I hadn't even thought of those, actually. I was thinking more along the lines of what the compromise was between 5 years and forever. And Mr. Cave has given me an eyebrow. 5 years being what we'd be allowed to hold the money for an off-site improvement, and forever being for an on-site improvement. That clears that up. I was actually thinking along the lines of 10 years. It's not much different than 8, but I don't know what the, even though the economic climate is looking good for development short term, you never know what's going to happen. And I think a 10-year assessment would be more appropriate. At least that's what I was thinking. We'll see if anyone else thinks that too. So I'm going to move to amend Commissioner Winston's 8-year holding of the $44,440 for the bridge assessment to 10 years.
I would support that, but I'd rather have another second.
Was
that a second? It has to be a second before we can discuss it.
Oh, well, I was hoping that another commissioner would second that
I'll second it.
amendment.
Okay. Second. So a motion by Commissioner Chesser and a second by Commissioner Hoskins on the amendment.
Yeah.
Did I say that correctly?
I believe so.
Okay.
I actually think I got it down. So, did you like to call the roll?
Call the roll.
Okay.
So,
Cook.
Yes.
We're voting on the amendment.
Okay, we're voting on the amendment.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Cook.
Yes.
Winston.
Yes.
Cabe.
No.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Chesser.
Yes.
Pennington.
No.
Hanschel.
Yes.
How many is that?
Motion passes.
Right.
Yep.
Motion passes.
Yeah.
5-3.
Okay. So I really don't know where we're at now.
Well, you're back to the original motion, but it's been amended from 5 years to, or from 8 years to 10 years.
Okay. And then the original motioner, do we have a motion on that one?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Whit.
that stays.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Mr. Chair,
Sir.
before we call roll on the original amended motion, I would like clarification on the 10-year time frame. Is the commission, is the motioner intending for that assessment to be automatically refunded at 10 years if it is not built, or is it something in the case where the developer may petition the planning commission again after 10 years? That's typically in the way our code reads for an offsite improvement. After 5 years, it doesn't automatically get returned. Usually the developer has the right to then bring it back to the commission, and the commission evaluates the feasibility of the improvement. So I just wanted clarification on that time frame.
And I'm going to guess that I'm the motioner at that point since it was my amendment. Is that correct?
Actually, Mr. Winston is the motioner. You just amended his motion.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to do it in the way that we normally do it. If we normally have it brought back before the commission for a reassessment, is that?
Yeah, reevaluation.
Reevaluation, then that would be my intention.
Okay, I think that's good. We can get that into the record then.
Okay. So now, are we prepared to call roll
On Mr. Winston's motion. Okay. Cook.
Yes.
Winston.
Yes.
Cabe.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Chesser.
Yes.
Pennington.
Yes.
Hanschel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Thank you. First item of new business is a conditional use permit, 1650 North Wheeler Road, McNair. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes, sir. This property is located at the. Is this one?
So we're doing Wheeler.
Oh, sorry. Never mind. Quinn's got this one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The property is located at 1650 North Wheeler Avenue, zoned residential family, single family, 4 units per acre, contains approximately 9 acres, large lot. This existing lot contains 1 residence with associated structures with access from a private drive, through a private drive from Wheeler Avenue, the end of Wheeler. The applicant is proposing a division into 2 tracts of 6.34 and 2.59 acres. This would allow for creation of obviously a second lot. It would be a tandem lot where the son of the property owner would build his own personal residence. Staff doesn't find that this tandem lot request would adversely affect neighboring properties, residences, and therefore we're recommending approval of CUP 134333 with standard conditions, including I would like to read condition number 3, that the entire property, including tandem lot, shall be assessed from the existing shared drive that's already within a private access easement. So with that, yeah, that's my report. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant available? If you would, please state your name. Tell us about your project.
Buckley Blue with Blue & Associates. I'm the surveyor on the project. I can answer any questions you guys may have.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. Is there any member of the public to comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Commissioners.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chesser.
I think this is straightforward. Exactly the reason that we have a tandem lot variation. And with that, I'm going to move that we approve CUP 13-4333 with staff recommendations of approval.
Second.
Okay, have a motion by Commissioner Chesser and a second by Commissioner Cabe.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question before we take a vote. Mr. Garner, does, I think the neighbors might want to know if this tandem lot creation would preclude further subdivision of either of these properties.
Mr. Chair, you want me to?
Certainly.
Under the code, you can only have one tandem lot. So this would not allow for additional tandem lots to be created. If they did want to subdivide this, not sure if it would be feasible, but if they built a full public street back into there, then it could be developed like a regular subdivision. So those are the two options. Under the existing lot split process, they can't split it anymore. But if they went through a whole subdivision process, then they could potentially.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Garner.
Okay, we have the motion and the second. Call the roll, please.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Cabe,
Yes.
Hoskins,
Yes.
Chesser,
Yes.
Pennington,
Yes.
Hanschel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Next item up is administrative item, ADM 13 dash, okay, I got it right. ADM 13-4330, southwest corner of 15th Street and Razorback Road. Could we have the staff report, please?
Sure. This property is undeveloped 4.42 acres. It's at the southwest corner of Razorback and 15th, and we have the aerial photo pulled up here in Google Earth. You can see the property along the western border of the property. Town Branch, which is our tributary stream to Town Branch, is along this western property line, and so it is subject to the streamside protection zone and the streamside protection ordinance. The applicant is submitted a conceptual site plan to build 2 multifamily buildings with approximately 68 units, 232 beds. And they're requesting variance of the streamside protection ordinance to build parking lot fully within both zones 1 and 2 of the streamside zone. And staff's review of the request, we don't feel like there's a hardship that exists that would require them to have the variance, the extent of the variance that they're proposing. We felt like there are potential design modifications that could pull back their impact to the streamside zone and meet the intent of the code. We feel like there's several options, including potentially, because of how close this is to campus, maybe reducing the parking some. They have in excess number of parking is what's actually required by the code. There's potential for some additional design solutions, including retaining walls, elevating portions of the building and having some parking underneath the building, or having a more vertical or compact development pattern where you might have a structured parking or a parking garage would also be an option. So we do feel like there's some other options. Because the streamside zone does encroach on a large percentage of this site, so we feel like there may be potential for some sort of encroachment, but we felt like this was too much, and so we're recommending denial of the request as presented. And we do have, I'm speaking here as well for Sarah Reed, the city floodplain administrator, who really evaluated this in detail, so feel free to ask her any questions. Thanks.
Okay. Is the applicant available? Go ahead, state your name and tell us about your project.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my name is Derek Davidson. I'm the attorney for University Housing Group, and also their representative here, along with Mr. Stephen Beam with Crafton and Tull. We kind of would like to make a presentation to you in tandem. Mr. Beam has been working with Ms. Reed and Mr. Garner in connection with the proposals with respect to the property. And then as an administrative matter and as an attorney, then I need to do and say some things at the conclusion of his presentation. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Beam.
Thanks, Derek. And, my name is Stephen Beam with Crafton Toll and Associates. And as Andrew mentioned, this is a 4.42 acre site. We had submitted in 2007 a PZD on this property, or actually submitted in 2006 a PZD for the property that was approved in 2007. And since that time, the Streamside Protection Ordinance has been adopted. And as Andrew mentioned, it takes up a large portion of the property. You can see the on the site plan that was up just a second ago, you can see the property is sort of elongated in the north-south direction, and it's the western boundary that the creek forms the western boundary. It occupies, the Streamside Protection Zone occupies about a little over 1.5 acres, which constitutes 35% of the site. What I'd like to do is, if I may, approach and hand out some this is a site plan that's very similar to the one that Glenn had shown up just a second ago that we had turned in after I saw staff's recommendations for design modifications. I felt it would be important to address a few of those. I considered bringing the 2007 site plan just as an example of the amount of encroachment that was approved at that time. Understandably, that was before the Streamside Protection Ordinance, and it's not quite an apples-to-apples comparison. But what would have been constructed during that time had us building retaining wall pretty much right up to the floodway line on the project, so it was a much greater encroachment onto the stream if it had been constructed. What we're proposing now is a significant reduction from that, and is, in all honesty, an attempt to find common ground between what the developer's needs are on the site, given the conditions and that the property was purchased under, and you know where we sit today, and the Streamside Protection Ordinance. Some of site, and I'll go into some of those specific details or proposals of the site here in just a second, but some of staff's specific recommendations are simply not feasible. Their first recommendation was to reduce the parking down to 151 standard stalls with 232 beds on the site. That would be very ill-advised. There would be undoubtedly parking problems on the site, and then that would ripple over and affect our neighbors. The industry standard, while I understand it's not the city code standard, is 1 bed per bedroom, or I mean 1 parking space per bed. If you guys could imagine, if you are renting a space and you have a place to sleep, chances are you're going to have a car to park in the parking area as well. We are already below that. The developer was comfortable, given proximity to campus and such, to go down to about 85% of that standard industry ratio, and we have gone down to that level. The recommendation was to use retaining walls along Razorback Road and move the buildings further east. There is an existing 20-foot wide utility easement that is adjacent to Razorback Road, and the buildings are pushed up against that utility easement, and so we cannot move those buildings any further east. There was a recommendation for one-way angled parking, and while that may gain us a little bit of footage, my experience in having done site designs and site layouts for 10 years, you generally lose efficiency whenever you go to angled parking. And so as we try to get back to that parking ratio that makes the project feasible from my client's perspective, we would possibly then be adding an extra set of aisles and parking rows. The number of tree islands that was mentioned, code requires 1 every 12 spaces. If we have 15 spaces in a run, we still have to add 1 in that distance, because we can't have more than 12. I don't believe that there are any more than what code would typically require. If there is, it's maybe 1 or 2, which won't amount to much in the grand scheme of things. The overall number of bedrooms and parking could be reduced was one of the recommendations. That is, on paper, a possible idea, and I understand that it's not necessarily something that this commission takes into consideration, but again, the developer purchased the property prior to the recession with intentions to develop outside of or prior to the streamside protection ordinance, and the recession came along, and so he's just, we have pulled down the number of beds and ran it in his pro forma, and this is the lowest that he can go and still make the project feasible to move forward with anything on the site. And so that's the just a few thoughts relative to staff's suggestions. I'd like now to focus on what we're proposing and why we think that it is, well, as staff even indicated, why it meets the intent of the ordinance. Staff indicated in their report that they believe that the stream and riparian enhancement plan and the proposed bioretention areas meet the intent of the ordinance, but then they qualify that and claim that, that they feel like even considering that, the encroachment is too great, and that's simply where we differ. We feel that if we have met the intent of the ordinance, we would appeal to you to approve it, approve the variance request with the understanding that we have met the intent of the ordinance. What you have, the plan that I handed out to you shows that utility easement that I referenced just a second ago in red, and then the areas in green are porous landscape areas in the islands. We would do depressed landscape islands, porous with an under drain that would drain out to the creek, the bioretention areas at the low points of our parking lot as they, to filter the water before it enters the creek. And then the gray areas shown there represent the porous pavement that we would propose. We're not just proposing these low impact development techniques within the streamside area, but we're proposing them over the entire site because we're encroaching approximately 3/4 of an acre within the streamside protection ordinance. And in turn, we're providing just under 1 acre of pervious area on the site with the use of our low impact development techniques. And then additionally, instead of just setting the stream aside, protecting the area, we have proposed the, I spoke and worked with on other projects, Sandy Formica and Matt Van Epps, on a fairly frequent basis, and so visited with Sandy and asked her to go look at the site and see if there were any recommendations that she would have with her expertise on what we could do to enhance the stream, not just set it aside and protect it as it is today, but to make some notable improvements. And included in your packet is her recommendations, which we fully support. This creek as it sets today is fairly stable, as she notes, but she did see some opportunity that some of the rock veins that they've used at Gully Park, but on a much smaller scale because we have a smaller drainage basin, could be applied here to improve the aquatic habitat in the area. But most notably, the improvement that she notes is the presence of invasive species within between the top of bank. And her recommendation was to go in and remove those invasive species kind of in a staged manner so we don't create a lot of exposed soil, and then replant those with native plants, native trees and shrubs. And then as we move to the southern side of the site, the creek begins to flow out, and as it connects with Town Branch Creek, and she recommended that we could do some wetland mitigation or wetland plantings in that area. As it flattens out, the stream begins to widen and make those improvements. And so, and then lastly, kind of with the ordinance, the streamside protection ordinance, as its best management practice manual states that one of the primary goals of the ordinance was to protect water quality. And we have water quality from a nutrient perspective, but then you also have degradation of your streams as a result of increased flows. We did an analysis, and it's also included in your packet, of comparing a site that set aside the streamside protection ordinance, or this site that did not touch the streamside zones, streamside or management zone, and had traditional development on that remaining remaining acreage of the property, and compared that to our proposed site, that it does encroach in the streamside protection areas, but it incorporates these low impact development techniques. And our analysis showed that the runoff volume generated from our proposed development is less than the runoff volume that would be generated by a traditional development that preserves that entire 50-foot strip, because within that traditional area we would be free to use entirely impermeable pavements and whatnot. And so considering that we've met the intent from a stormwater management perspective, that we have even exceeded the disturbed areas with low impact development techniques on the site, and that we've proposed to offset those encroachments with the stream enhancement plan, we would respectfully ask that you would grant this variance and allow this project to move forward in a fairly timely manner. So,
I guess I can liken this to the good cop and the bad cop. Obviously, as an attorney, that makes me the bad cop. But I think what I'd like to begin out by saying is that I think Stephen has demonstrated the lengths to which this owner, University Housing Group, has gone to try to work with the staff in order to accommodate the overall plan, and particularly the streamside protection ordinance, in order to try to achieve the highest and best use of this property that the owner of this property had intended for when he purchased it. The adoption of the streamside ordinance came shortly after his purchase of this property. As Stephen alluded to, it came before this commission with a plan that was ultimately approved due to the recession, or let's say at least economic downturn. He didn't proceed with those plans at that time. We're now starting to look brighter, thankfully, from an economic standpoint, and he's wanting to proceed with using this property for its highest and best use, which is similar to what he had originally proposed prior to the adoption of the stream protection ordinance. The original plan was much more extensive than what Mr. Beam has presented to you in the package. It was more invasive of the stream than what's now been proposed. And again, Ms. Reed and Mr. Beam and Mr. Garner and the rest of the staff have worked diligently to try to reach an agreement on what could accommodate the highest and best use of the property. All that being said, I mean, we're in an administrative procedure, as Mr. Williams will know, is no doubt familiar with, and as the Administrative Procedures Act in this the Arkansas Supreme Court has interpreted, in order for this owner to be able to make arguments at a later date, he's obliged at this point to at least present these legal arguments to you that he would have in connection with this matter, so that they can later be raised in the event that the commission is not willing to recommend that this ordinance be adopted. That being said, I guess we start off with the Arkansas Constitution. And the Arkansas Constitution provides that no landowner's property shall be taken without just compensation. Well, with regard to the streamside ordinance, the client would raises the argument that without the being able to accommodate him with respect to the highest and best use of the property as proposed by Mr. Beam, then that his contention is that he would be deprived of his property without just compensation under the Arkansas Constitution and the United States Constitution. Based on that, any adverse decision with respect to this matter would bring to bear some need to make a determination about the constitutionality and enforceability of not only the actions of this commission and the city council that would follow if they indeed agreed with the commission's decision and it was adverse to the client, but there would be a need to determine whether or not the streamside protection ordinance is in fact constitutional and whether any such actions would be constitutional against this client. With regard to the specific issues related to the streamside protection ordinance and the variance, we would also raise, based on the Constitution, an issue with respect to the vague and language with respect to what constitutes an undue hardship, particularly based on the fact that whether there are unique characteristics that would be present that would warrant it and whether substantial justice would warrant it. I submit to you that based on the fact that the passage of this streamside ordinance, and as Mr. Beam has just explained, 37% of the site being rendered virtually unusable without some sort of variance being granted, that 37% of Mr. Our University Housing Group's property has been taken without him being justly compensated for that. And it was done so based on a vague and ambiguous ordinance that was adopted by the City Council. There's the matter of alternative measures that Mr. Beam has worked on significantly with the staff in order to try to reach a recommendation that the ordinance or that the variance be granted. Unfortunately, hasn't been able to achieve that recommendation, but certainly hope that this commission would make that recommendation. But barring that, the reference to whether or not there is some reasonable effort on the part of the applicant to accommodate the streamside ordinance, that those terms in the variance provisions of the Fayetteville Code of Ordinances would likewise be vague and ambiguous. In some, we don't want to go to battle over this, but I think any of you sitting there who had bought a piece of property and only to find that 37% of that property had been rendered unusable, so that the highest and best use of that property as contemplated by the property owner at the time it was purchased can no longer be accomplished. I hope you can understand that that's a substantial burden and a substantial hardship to University Housing Group, the applicant, and hopefully this matter can be resolved with this commission's approval of the proposal that Mr. Beam has made. And but again, it's simply the law that I have to be here and present that to you, not to affront you, and I hope you'll understand that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm sure we'll have some questions for you. Is there any member from the public to speak to this? Could state your name, please.
Aubrey Shepard. Yeah, I was photographing this parcel when the first proposal came through, and I don't have immediate access to those because that old website that's got a lot of them is temporarily out of service because the computer's too old. Anyway, the highest and best use is in whose eyes? The highest and best use would be to leave that prairie parcel with that stream alone. Okay, but this is expensive property because it's right there by the university. Therefore, that option would take a donor who's very generous, I assume. But what Mr. Stephen Beam has proposed in low impact development methods are very good. And the restoration of the stream, and we had talked about plants that grow there over the years. And there, for instance, the monarch butterfly this year is at its lowest level in Mexico, where it spends the winter, the fewest ever since they found out where they went when they left here in the summer and fall. So milkweed's very important. Well, that particular big lot has maybe 100 milkweed plants, which is a lot of caterpillars can grow on those. And I photographed those as late as last summer. Now, there are also some other wonderful species, but those could be moved easily over to the streamside protection area by digging them up, taking a large swath of root, putting them in a large hole, keep them watered, let them keep growing. Because they're perennials, they come back. The butterflies come, they don't have the milkweed, they don't go back. It's sort of popular, and it truly is in danger because fields all over this area and all over the United States are being destroyed for development and pipelines and other purposes. Anyway, excuse me. But the most intriguing thing was the stormwater administrators mention of putting the buildings or a building above a deck. That's being done in this city a lot. And I'm sure that costs more than just ground pavement, but when you go to the pervious instead of impervious pavement, you're spending a little more. But considering that that's a parking lot right now, has been for ever since Baum Stadium was built and we started getting 5, 7 or more thousand people for Razorback games, that lot is totally covered with cars on ball game days. And that's partially true when there's like the NCAA track meet is there. Some of the overflow parking goes there. And on Razorback football game days. So the only times I've gotten to photograph the plants there were in part of the season when they weren't bothering to mow it. And it would actually show the native stuff. And you can see those on my Flickr site on the internet. But if one building were put there instead of 3 condo buildings or whatever, and they're allowed to be taller, which things are being built taller than people wanted them to be a few years ago now, student apartments and such, then the parking could be kept away from the stream side. Approximately that little road that goes down through there that you can see on the map, on the aerial photos and so forth. Milkweed actually grows along that. But some of those things and some of the things that are closer to Razorback Road, as I say, could be transplanted. And they're native plants that are rare enough that that's worth doing at this time. And it's not that expensive. But anyway, I would hope that a compromise could be reached. I don't think this makes it unusable to follow the streamside ordinance. And the people who were pushing for the streamside ordinance, a great many people over quite a few years, are talking about good science. In many places, this is already done, and it's not been, but we compromised. Every meeting that was held to discuss that ordinance, there was a little compromise. Okay, we'll make it a little smaller. The whole lot would have been unbuildable totally if we'd followed what might be a national standard for progressive cities. And even the Corps of Engineers regulations, which are softer in some ways, but upstream from there, Mr. Hoskins, I believe, you can confirm, if Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hoskins can confirm that there is an area that is a partial contributor way up at Razorback Road to this flow. It goes underground. It's in pipes. It's in a pipe under an apartment complex partially, and then it's in a pipe under the Razorback Stadium, and it comes out into that one single retention pond on the whole University of Arkansas campus. That's the only one. The whole campus has been built without regard to the streams, except for that, which was, what, 15 years ago now? Anyhow, adjacent to the railroad, behind the Revenue Office, there's a Corps of Engineers designated wetland that's protected. Most people have never seen it because there's a fence up there, and that's been up there maybe 7 or 8 years or something. And it's still got Corps signs, I believe, inside it, inside the fence. You can look through the cracks in the fence and see it. But this is an idea. The whole area down through there has been covered that was wetland with a stream through it, and intermittent stream at times of the year with just a swamp left up there behind the Revenue Office and on the other side north of there. So I would love to see them find a way to mitigate the whole thing or mitigate what damage there is and allow useful construction there. And it might mean taking a little time to look at it again. I mean, sure, you've got the staff recommendation here, but you also have suggestions from the staff how the plan could be revised. Because to me, the streamside ordinance is extremely important, and every minor variance to it sort of defeats the purpose. And it's not about just wildlife, it's primarily about water quality. And, you know, our legislature is actually considering weakening the water quality rules that the ADEQ imposes statewide. But you got to think about it. Potentially, any water body in the state is potential drinking water. So we should be trying to see that none of it is polluted if possible. Well, that's the longest speech I've probably ever made to you guys. Thank you for being tolerant.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Could state your name, please.
My name's Colleen Gaston, and I'm here wearing a different hat than earlier. I'm here as a representative of Beaver Water District, which is located at on Primrose Road in Lowell, Arkansas, and is the regional drinking water utility for Northwest Arkansas. And I'm here not to take a position on the variance because unfortunately we weren't aware of this until recently. We haven't done a thorough technical review, but I would like, and Beaver Water District would like to essentially reiterate our support for the Streamside Protection Ordinance, which has come under attack here tonight, and point out that this development is adjacent to Town Branch and a tributary of Town Branch, and which are both significant urban streams that are in the Beaver Lake watershed, which is in Beaver Lake again being the source of our drinking water. So we just want to point out our support for the Streamside Ordinance and you know, encourage the Planning Commission to act in accordance with that ordinance, both the, as was said earlier, the spirit and intent, and also with the understanding that while at times variances may be appropriate and necessary, that, you know, again, because we are concerned about the protection of Beaver Lake and what goes into the lake from the urban streams, you know, we would hate to get into a situation where variances were the rule rather than the exception. So thank you again for your consideration on this matter.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else to speak to this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioner Hoskins.
First question is for staff. The PCD was approved in 2007. Is that correct?
I can't remember the exact date, but
Okay, and how long do PZDs have before they expire if nothing's built?
Every PZD is different and approved with a separate phasing plan. The PZD on this site has been expired for a couple of years. The owner or the applicant probably could tell you exactly when it expired, but it's no longer a valid development.
Okay.
As far as the PZD.
So we're basically starting over from scratch.
Right, and then if you remember, like, I believe it was last year, maybe the year before, staff brought forward a whole bunch of expired PZDs, and we had actually put a valid zoning district in place, and we did that on this particular piece of property, so that they actually would have a legal usable zoning, and this was urban thoroughfare, which is a very high-intensity commercial or mixed-use or multifamily zoning. So there's a number of different development options for the property under the zoning.
That's actually, you were going to what I was going to ask you next, but to elaborate on that, then vertical development is much easier on this property than it would be on some other properties. In other words, being able to go, what's the height limitation in this zone?
I'd have to go back and look at it. I think it's probably 5 stories.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% certain. I can look that up here in the next, while we're talking.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to know that. Question for engineering. The applicant made a statement, well, I wrote down 2 different numbers. The engineer said that 35% of the site was in the streamside protection area. And then later on, the applicant's attorney said 37% of the site, and that may be reversed or whatever. Regardless, 35 to 37%, whatever. My question is, how much of that area, or do we know, how much of that area is in floodway or floodplain? In other words, what's unbuildable in that area regardless, without having special permission or what have you?
This site's floodplain it's a zone A, which means that there isn't a defined floodway, so there's only a floodplain shown.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't tell you exactly how much land that includes. The area below the top of bank and the furthest left line, left red dotted line, is indicating top of bank. So generally the area that's shaded in blue would be where the creek is and within the banks of the creek. And I would not, generally consider that to be developable, regardless of whether we have this ordinance or not. We don't encourage grading within the stream banks. So the area from the top of bank, to the first 25-foot zone and then coming into the second 25-foot zone where most of the encroachment is proposed, I believe that that's about 3/4 of an acre. And I think that's what Mr. Beam said, which would be the area that would be affected by this ordinance.
Okay. So what you're saying is 3/4 of an acre would be affected by this ordinance if it was not in place, as opposed to the 35 or 37% that they mentioned a while ago. Okay. So we're really not talking about, as far as the streamside protection ordinance, we're not really talking about 35 or 37%. We're talking about 3/4 of an acre. Okay.
Out of a total lot size of 4.42 acres.
You want to do the math for that for me?
No, I don't want to do the math on that.
Fine, I'll do it myself. So it's 3/4 an acre. And how many acres is it, Kit?
4.42 according to the report.
That's more like 17%. Okay.
And possibly the applicant knows exactly how much area is in those 2 zones.
I'm sorry?
Possibly the applicant knows exactly how much area is within those 2 zones.
Yeah, I'm planning on getting to him.
I think I heard 3/4.
Yeah. Okay. So approximately 17%. Okay. The next question is, there were 228 beds, is that right?
232, I think.
Yeah. 232.
232, I'm sorry. I don't know where I got 228 from. Okay, and on this drawing, and I tried to count it and add it up, but I came up with different numbers every time. Of course, Matt laughed at me every time I did it. So how many parking spaces are on this drawing that we received?
The report says 234 on the first page of this agenda item.
Okay.
That includes
motorcycle, bicycles.
Okay. As I counted these parking spaces, like I said, I got different numbers every time, but around 211 is what I got. But anyway, as far as our ordinance goes, as far as parking ratios, can you give me the parking ratios on multifamily residential?
Yeah. It's based on the number of bedrooms. It's 1 parking space per bedroom. And then there's also some reductions. If you're within a quarter mile of a transit stop, which this site is, you can reduce the parking by, I believe, 15%. You can also have 10% of the parking spaces with motorcycle or scooter parking spaces. You could also do 10% of the parking spaces substitute with more bicycle racks. You also have the option of doing up to 35% of the spaces as compact spaces. So those are some different options that could be utilized.
So is it safe to say with this plan, the applicant is planning this project assuming that every bed is rented and everybody's going to be home at the exact same time and everybody drives a car? Is that what this plan represents?
Mr. Chair, I would just let the applicant address that.
Yeah, it's a good idea. You've heard the question I asked staff.
Yeah, you're asking about parking.
Yeah.
The standard spaces, I think it's actually included in the report. I don't have the site plan.
I think it says 206
standard spaces.
21 motorcycle.
21 motorcycle spaces, 70 handicap spaces.
How many handicap?
7.
So, wow, we're talking about, well, that's more than the number of beds then, isn't it?
There's 234 according to those numbers.
234.
So what it adds up, there's 206 standard spaces.
Okay, so a couple of people get to have a car and a moped, right?
No, there's 232 beds. There's 21 people who don't get to have a car.
Okay. Oh, I got you. You're right. Okay, I apologize. A few moments ago, I asked staff about the property that was in the floodplain.
Yeah.
Okay, or the unbuildable area to begin with, compared to the property that's encumbered by the streamside protection area.
Yes, sir.
And so, 3/4 of an acre of difference is what was thrown out a little bit ago. Can you speak to that?
Yes, sir. On the streamside protection ordinance or zone, if you consider it the 50-foot width that is outside of the top of bank, that's about an acre. I don't have the exact numbers with me, but it's roughly an acre of land. The area from the top of bank to our property line, which is the center line of the creek is pretty much our property line, is half an acre. So if you take out that half an acre of top of bank area that we may not be able to utilize anyway, and you compare 1 acre to 3.92 acres, it's 25%. So the 35% was, I didn't ever really think about measuring it that way, was just from the far east line, which is the edge of that 50 feet, all the way over to our property line is 1.56 acres.
But you do agree that it's not 35 or 37% then? Because
1.56 acres is 35%. If you take out the section from the top of bank into the property line, I would agree. You're looking at 25% of the site.
So, because I'm trying to make it clear for the record, so in reality, we're not talking about 35% of this property is lost due to the streamside protection ordinance. We're saying that closer to 3/4 to maybe even 1 acre.
As compared to the what may be considered developable or usable on site. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
And it was not intended to be a misrepresentation. That was just the way that I
I understand. I'm just looking at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The next thing was
you asked about the floodway.
Oh yeah, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sarah was right, but in 2006, whenever we did the PZD, we did do a detailed study and submit that. It was reviewed by staff, Matt Casey, we were working with at the time, and established a floodway. It's shown on the, it may be difficult to see, but there's a light gray line that's going to be pretty close to the, if I remember correctly, that floodway width was only something like 20 or 30 feet. So it's going to be pretty much running parallel to the property line. There should be a kind of a light gray line underneath that.
So it's not that
green.
blue area?
The blue area does not represent the floodway or floodplain. The light gray line you see there that the cursor's on, that would represent the floodway. The floodplain is actually well inside of the streamside protection ordinance on the northern end of the site, and it gets out of the site, out of the streamside protection area as you move to the southern end of the site. But as you all know, that floodplain is not considered a no man's land. It can be filled, and even within the streamside protection ordinance, you can still fill within that floodplain. It delineates to the floodway as the maximum limits of
yeah,
the
well, that's
streamside
not necessarily a given.
No, not a given always. It would
Okay.
be the greater of this 50-foot measurement or the floodway.
Right.
That's how the ordinance is written.
Okay. The next question I had was, the applicant was talking about, well, let me ask you a question. Has this property changed hands since
No, sir.
2007?
The same person.
Same owner
ownership.
since
Yes,
2007? Okay.
University Housing Group is who purchased it, submitted the PZD, and they've held it during this time.
Okay, great, okay. Okay. Mr. Chair, that's all I have for this moment. May have something later, but not sure.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering how tall are the buildings that are proposed? How
I'm
many
sorry?
stories are the buildings?
The buildings are 4 stories.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is that it? Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I ask one question?
Certainly.
You addressed all of the staff's comments when they said you could do different things to
Except for
protect the
one?
stream side, except structured parking.
Yes.
Could you address that?
And yes, thank you for asking that, because whenever Mr. Shepherd was making his comments, I realized that I did forget it. And I do, if I may take just a moment and appreciate, I have worked with Mr. Shepherd on another project, the View, that is under construction at the moment, and have spoken with him on this project, and appreciate his comments and respect his opinions. As far as the structured parking, if you will look back at the proposal in 2007, we had many more beds in that proposal, and there was structured parking proposed in that scenario. In addition, with the downturn of the recession, even prior to the downturn of the recession, when the project was tabled, it was tabled primarily because the costs of the project were not feasible, and a lot of that was attributed to the cost of the structured parking. So that was a specific direction that, or specific element that the economics of the project just could not swallow. So, I mean, there's no other, I'd be lying to if I stood up here and gave you some other justification, but it just comes down to economics. So.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chesser.
If the city attorney thinks it's appropriate, is it possible for you to address the notion that the Streamside Protection Ordinance amounts to a taking? The claim made by the applicant? And I guess what I'd want to compare it with is things like rights of way and other setbacks and other zoning that are typically allowable by a municipality. Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
That's fine. When you get into the area of constitutional regulatory takings case law, it's fairly complex, and each item, each parcel must be looked on at it for itself. Land is very different. I think it's important to look at how much of the land is actually affected, and here we have various different ways to look at this. You can look at, quote, buildable property, and then they would be talking about 25% being affected. If you looked at the entire property, less than that, it'd be more like 20%. I do think that there are other things to look at. For example, the ordinance had in section B applicability and 1 undeveloped lots. and it gave an owner of undeveloped lots of an acre or more 1 year to begin development and be totally outside the streamside protection ordinance, so that they certainly had a year to develop. They also had a project that was completed for a while, that was approved for a while, that could have been developed because pre-existing projects were going to be allowed, and we weren't going to try to affect them with streamside protection ordinance. So there was a couple other things like that they could have done if they wanted to protect their property interests, and that makes it less likely that there was a regulatory takings, but only the courts can finally decide that. Secondly, of course, is the variance procedure, and I push very hard for there to be a variance procedure, so that if somebody's land was substantially diminished because of the streamside protection ordinance, so it'd be unfair to that property owner, that this planning commission would be able to look at that and to grant whatever variance is needed for substantial justice. Now, the attorney talked about how that was vague language. That's the same language we have virtually for all our variances, and it has to be language that's broad enough to allow the proposed developer to make any kind of arguments he wants to make. We don't want to say you have to hit A, B, and C, and we're not going to think about D, because he might have some cause or argument to you that would make a lot of difference for his parcel only. So the language is going to be broad in the variance procedure to allow you to consider basically anything that the developer might want to propose to you, and then for you to consider many different things when you're looking at whether or not a variance should be granted, always keeping in mind the purpose of the streamside protection ordinance. And I think they made good arguments on that, that they're proposing some mitigation of the stream to help the stream. And of course, stability of the stream bank is very important. And so they were talking about doing things like that, which should also be considered as you are looking at a potential variance. I think I was hoping that the developer might be able to come up with a variance that would be less intrusive into the streamside protection ordinance. We have two zones, of course, one 0 to 25 feet from the top of the bank and one 25 to 50. Obviously, we're most interested in that closest to the stream bank area, and whether or not they can come up with a design that will not go into that area as much. I think it is hopefully feasible for them to do that. We don't see that now, and I don't know, you know, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, I can't design that, but I think that would be something to look at. Can they design a project that will not impinge upon the streamside protection ordinance as much as the one that they have presented here? Keeping in mind, obviously, money is an issue for everybody when they develop here. So, I mean, it'd be very easy for us to say, well, you just got to put a deck up, put all your parking in the deck, and stay totally outside the streamside protection ordinance. Well, that might not be economically feasible with this project. On the other hand, they might be able to do more than what they have done to stay out of especially the streamside zone, not the management zone, which is the farther away zone. But I will also say I think our ordinance is constitutional. I think it is being applied constitutionally. However, I think that when you talk about concerns about money damages and things like that, that is really much more for the city council to consider. And of course, your decision can be appealed to the city council. You all should only concern yourselves with this ordinance. You should presume that it is legal and constitutional, and you should apply it as if it is. It might be at some point a court would tell us it's not, but you don't need to try to be making that decision. You need to be applying the ordinance that was passed by the city council. They passed it, you apply it.
Mr. Chair, if I can continue first, thank you, council. That's wise counsel, and I appreciate it a great deal. Question for staff. The comment was made by the applicant that city staff seemed to indicate that they had met the intent of the ordinance, and yet city staff still felt that they couldn't recommend this project. Can you respond to that?
I can respond to that. I feel that that was taken out of context. This is my complete sentence. The staff believes the attached stream and a riparian enhancement plan and the proposed bioretention areas within the landscape areas proposed will meet the intent of the ordinance if the total SBZ encroachment can be limited to the management zone and existing utility easement areas only. I feel that this encroachment is to such a degree that it's not even time to start thinking about the mitigation yet. But I've anticipated that you might be wondering if staff feels that the mitigation is moving in the right direction. And so my comment is more about, you know, if we could see a much smaller encroachment on the whole, I think that they are moving in the right direction with their mitigation proposal.
Great. That's exactly the kind of clarification I wanted to. I just wanted to find out what you had to say about in response to that. A follow-up then, something that hadn't occurred to me. I did like the idea that you had recommended and the applicant had agreed to remove the invasive species and replant with native species. But Mr. Shepard, who often brings lots of wise counsel to this body, mentioned transplanting the milkweed. Can you opine about his comment on that? Or is that outside your purview?
Yeah, I think that's really outside my purview.
Okay. Is there somebody on staff that could comment on that in the future can comment that, or is that outside?
We could look into
I think that's outside the streamside protection ordinance. That's toward trying to help
fair enough.
Butterflies, which we want to help, but I think that's beyond what we can do for a streamside protection ordinance.
That's fine. Even given that, is it possible, if with the chair's forbearance, for me to recognize the applicant who raised his hand to speak to that?
Yes.
I'd love to hear your comments, sir.
If I may first just point out, it was not my intent to pull anything out of context. I think if you review what I said, I did point out that she qualified her statement with respect to meeting the intent of the ordinance, and simply on that qualification was where we disagreed. And so
let me make sure that you understand I wasn't accusing you of anything. I just wanted to hear staff's
Yeah,
response.
And I did speak with Mr. Shepard about the milkweed, and this on projects where I've worked with him in the past. This is something that he's brought up, and it's very simple to transplant some of that stuff. What we did on the other project was he identified some areas. We stripped that topsoil and we'll reuse it on the site. If we can progress with the construction of this, we would commence that construction this summer while his milkweed is up, and he could identify that for us, and we could dig it up and then transplant it into the stream. And so it would be very easy to identify, but that's certainly something that is easily incorporated into our vegetation management plan.
Would you say that's so easy that you'd be willing to do it even if this particular item didn't pass today?
I think that's probably
no, I mean, and
just curious.
It's you know, in the future we'll see. It is something that can be tackled.
If that's out of bounds, I apologize, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Cook.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
May I speak again?
Yes.
After looking at the handout, conceptual site plan, I am noticing that while this pink shaded area, which is utility easement, could not have the buildings located in it, you could locate parking in those areas, and possibly if the building was maybe further west, you could it's on the handout all along the utility easement, which is the lighter red shading. That is area that may be available to parking in.
Let me ask planning though, our new urban design standards don't like parking next to streets. Would they be able to put parking in there?
They would have to get some sort of a variance.
From the Planning Commission?
Right, in order to grant parking in the build-to zone. So that would be something that, you know, could be presented, but yeah, it's not allowed by right.
Okay. Were you done?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay, because I do have, if I may ask real quick, because that was one thing that a question I have for the applicant, because that's what I was looking through with what I understand to be the stream side zone, the first
25 feet.
First setback, I guess.
Yes, sir.
The parking spaces that would be affected by that, I was counting about 47. Well, I'm saying total. I guess the first wave through. I was going to ask, as far as which parking spaces were motorcycle and bicycle and things like that. And that's what I was going to ask, was if you could put the bicycle and the motorcycle parking into the utility. That actually I was going to ask staff, because I don't know
what we did with the motorcycle and scooter parking is, in order to try to not occupy any other or extend our development footprint, we tucked those into the islands that had adequate width to accommodate them. So you'll see they're just to the east of our entrance. There are two wider islands. Yeah, thanks, Glenn.
Oh, I see.
Those islands there. And so we tucked those motorcycle and scooter parking spaces into those islands.
Okay.
One of the things that you would consider if they're asked for a variance in order to get parking closer to the street than normally is allowed in this district would be something like preserving the right-of-way, or preserving the green space near the stream protection ordinances. So that I think that would be one of the justifications that the Planning Commission could use to grant a variance to allow the parking near the street, is to protect the streamside ordinance. Would you be able to, in your design, have you looked at all about putting the parking where the utilities would go, and how many parking spaces you'd be able to pick up if you were able to do that?
I haven't looked on the Razorback Road side because my experience, the urban residential design standards have been something that's fairly tough to get variance on, so I did stay away from that. So I can't say that we have. It could be possible it would shift the buildings back to the west. And my initial thinking is that you'd basically just be trading parking from one side of the building to the next, and you're not going to affect what we're disturbing on the site. And so the
well, that's,
go ahead.
There's a fair amount of width between the between Razorback Road and the right-of-way, but being that a state right-of-way, if it were city right-of-way and the city could grant us the right to have a driveway with adequate separation that's running parallel to the road within that right-of-way, that might be something that could reduce the footprint, but that being a state right-of-way, I don't anticipate the highway department granting that. And I don't want you all to leave with the impression that we've tried to come here with our grandiose, ideal development that maximizes every penny that we want. I went through knowing that this was going to be a pretty tough variance to request, a lengthy process with the developer, and examining his pro forma and determining really what is the bottom number of units that he can yield on the property, given what he purchased the property for, what he's been carrying it for, and all those things that you all understand from a business perspective come into play. And I can tell you there's not a lot of room where we can come in with 180 beds and make this project feasible. So.
Okay. Thanks, Commissioner Cook.
Yep, thank you. I love start talking about a development when we're quoting constitutional law. That's always a good start. But I guess you were kind of alluding to my question. Is there still room to work with staff and the developer on this to maybe find something that's closer? Because, really, I don't have a problem with this development in this site, but it just doesn't quite reach our desired protection of the stream side. And it seems like there may be some more negotiation room there with staff, between staff and the developer. I don't know. I can't tell. Or is this a line in the sand saying this is what we want, come hell or high water, this pass or doesn't tonight? I don't know where you're at on that. Staff, board, developer, either one of you. I'm just curious, is there any more negotiation to happen here? Or is
I know I'm not supposed to come up unless I'm recognized, so I just want to make sure.
I think he called you
This is one of those moments where I wish my client were here. If I may, I know I can't ask staff a question, so I'll address it to the Planning Commission, and if you can address. The sense that I have gotten is that staff has indicated to me that that we need to reduce the number of units, or we need to move our parking underneath the building. That the footprint is just simply too large, and neither one of those are economically feasible for us. And so if those are our two sort of negotiating items, you know, places where we can find common ground, then I would just respectfully ask that that a decision be made tonight, and we'll follow the course after that. Because those two items from my client, he's indicated he can't reduce the number of units, and structured parking is not an option. And what's driving the development size or the footprint is as we have units, we have to have parking spaces. And so we can't reduce our parking ratios any lower, and we can't go structured parking, and we can't reduce our building units. So that kind of locks us in with the footprint, and that's why we went to great length to try to propose and try to show that that the low impact development best management practices do meet the intent of the ordinance, that the same level of protection, both from a stormwater quality perspective and from runoff generation and such are being met by the proposal. And then the stream enhancement plan, I feel, is the mitigation for the fact that we are doing some grading within that area, and is going to mitigate for that and make this area a place that, rather than being over time, those invasive species are just going to get worse. We can remove those now and put some natives in there that will ensure that this area stays as a nice stream ecosystem. So,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't mind, to finish responding to the question, I guess, the staff's position, and I was going to defer to Ms. Reed afterwards, but just to get on the record, for staff's perspective, we definitely want to continue to work with the applicant if there's an opportunity. But the drawings that we're looking at is conceptual to some degree, has not gone through the planning process that we normally see through technical plat to look at the other divisions, stormwater drainage, design. This is more or less, to some degree, I mean, in my opinion, it's conceptual, but you're being asked to grant a variance on the entire length of the parcel and stream side in and beyond the stream side protection zone for 25 and 50. So that is where there's a little bit of challenge on our end, is to present, we're going to present our opinion, but without all the data of seeing how the site's ultimately going to be designed. Look, tree preservation is one of the items that I know that will have to be addressed also, to see if there's any other variances there, drainage, detention, how the whole site's going to work. So just to make sure everyone's fully aware, this has not been through any technical review, design process. This is just coming through to ask a variance, and I'm not personally sure if they're granting or potentially granting the entire variance as shown, or some portion, or negotiation. So ultimately, before there's a vote to decide which way this is going, to be helpful to fully understand what you're granting, so that if it is a granting of it, to, as we're doing our review, to know where our limits are. And I'll pass that on to Ms. Reed to finish that, if you have anything.
The variances that we've looked at on the stream side in the past have been on a number of square feet, and it's been a pretty small number of square feet. So yeah, I don't know how many square feet they're proposing. I guess we're looking at the footprint of encroachment. But yeah, staff does hope that we would get the chance to work with the applicant on some more design alternatives for this site.
Let me just finish real quick on my thought. And I mean, in the past, we've granted variances in the streamside protection area, and generally, those have been in the maintenance areas, if I remember right, the maintenance zone. I don't recall ever dipping into the first 25-foot buffer, and I sure don't recall going over the top of bank area. So,
if we went into this closer area, it was not very much. If we ever did it before.
And that's that first 25-foot zone and encroaching in some over the top of the bank. I mean, those are my issues on this. And like I said, I don't have a problem with your development on this site, but I think we just got to work it in with the requirements we have. That's my only comment.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chesser.
With the understanding that probably building design also costs money, so saying things like, well, why don't you just make 3 buildings taller and remove 1 building to add more parking? I understand that costs money. I do think there are some other options. I think staff has shown themselves very willing to continue to work with the applicant, and it sounds to me like the applicant's willing to work with staff potentially, and I'm wondering if we might be at a very opportune moment to table potentially, if that is, I would assume that would be acceptable to the applicant, but I would love to hear from them if that's okay, Mr. Chair. That's where I'm inclined at this position, because it sounds like a compromise can be made, and I'd much rather see a compromise be made and the development go forward if that's possible.
Of course, that's not going to meet I don't have any problems with that. Mr. Beam?
If it's tabled, what's the time frame? The next meeting is in
What would you like the time frame to be?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
But let me make clear, if I'm still holding the floor, that if 2 weeks, I also have worked on your side of the table, so if 2 weeks is not enough, I would be willing to table it longer if you're looking for shorter, which I also understand. 2 weeks is the minimum I can do.
Yeah. May I ask a question? If I know with the rezone, if you bring a rezone before the board and it's denied, you can't bring it back for a 1-year time period.
The identical rezoning, yes.
Does that apply also to variance requests?
The typical, it's not in the code that I'm aware of. We typically have not allowed for the exact same variance request within the same year. If there was some sort of a change to the request, we could bring that back almost immediately. It's a new request. So I think if for example, this were denied, and then you decided the applicant decided to take, half of the impact out of the stream side, they can come back with another request.
Okay.
As long as it were different.
Okay.
May I confer with my partner?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Are you talking right now?
I think I'm still holding the floor.
Yes, you will. But you don't have to.
I will say, I'll hold my comment, and I'll relinquish the floor, Mr. Chair, if other people have comments.
Commissioner Winston.
Just had a question about if the applicant does stream bank restoration and puts in plants and takes out invasives and brings in natives and stuff, is there any trigger to down the road look at that and say this is working, or it's, most of these plants have died, we need you to go back in and sort that out? Does anybody know that?
I do.
Great. Go for it.
The revegetation plan, the recommendations from Sandy that were included in your packets, or included with our submission, she included in that 5-year maintenance time period. Similar to if you do Corps of Engineer mitigation, you have a 5-year time of maintenance, observation, maintenance, and replacing plants that die and such. And so that was included in her language that we would agree to. And if I may answer one question that was asked just a second ago about the square footage, The letter that we submitted indicated that the encroachment, and this may be a bad thing, I don't, from your views, but it's in the letter and it's fact, was 0.76 acres. And so if you're looking for some number to nail us to, I guess, you know, or hold us to through the large-scale development, what we've requested is 0.76 acres. 0.34, I believe, of which was included in the stream side zone. Yeah, 0.34 acres in that first zone 1, and the remainder up to 0.76 acres being in the management zone.
Can you tell us who Sandy is and what her qualifications are and what her role is in your project?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sandy Formica is the executive director of the Watershed Conservation Resource Center. They are the group that did the stream restoration project at Goldie Park and Neocasa Creek. They've worked hand in hand with the city, and we've worked with them on projects where we're doing stream restoration. And I mean, this is what they do day in, day out. I think they're probably the foremost experts in the Northwest Arkansas region in matters such as this.
Do you think you could entice her to come in next time you're here, talk about this?
And talk about that?
I think
would imagine
it'd be helpful, at least on your part, you know, for us to.
This firm has worked for the city, been hired by the city to do this kind of stream restoration work.
Well, I think that's a piece of information that's pretty helpful, you know, for us. And I would be interested when you come back to see what could happen if parking was allowed to be in that setback along 15th Street. I think that there's a chunk of land there that we might, you know, a little massaging might get a few more spaces there. In regards to the idea of structured parking, as much as I like to say, oh, you should have structured parking, I wouldn't want the cost of the structured parking to take away from being able to do all these other low impact development things. So I think we should consider that. And I was impressed by the table that you put forth regarding the impact that those low impact development moves have compared to just simply staying out of the area and not really doing anything with the stream side. I think, and I also think that that this stream side protection ordinance is having a strong effect on this project and water quality, and that it wouldn't have it had it not been in place. Even though that there's clearly some encroachment, huge encroachment into the zones that have been presented. So I think I'd be interested when you come back to hear more from Sandy about this table, what it really means, a little bit more professional understanding than I can get just by looking at it.
The table is outside of her purview. She's not an engineer. That was something that was prepared by us, but it is something that Glenn's not had an opportunity to review in detail. And so what I can do in the meantime is get Glenn the calculations that are behind that table so he can review and agree or disagree. It was prepared based on your low impact development manual.
Right, maybe we can have like a graph with colors or something like that. You know, something that somebody like me can say, okay, something's happening there. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing you back in a couple weeks.
And if, the 2 weeks will be fine, and then if we're not prepared, we had submitted this and it was slated for the, I don't even know what day we're on. I think it was slated for the March 18th meeting, but we continued working with Sarah to try to find some common ground, and so we delayed it until this point. So tabling for 2 weeks will be fine. If we need more time, we'll make sure staff is made aware in time to maybe slide that to your next agenda. So.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chester.
So I was wondering, Commissioner Winston was making the assumption we were going to table. I wasn't sure if you were okay with that.
That is fine.
That's good to know. I do want to say, I do like what you did propose. I agree with Commissioner Winston that I think that to some degree, even were we to vote yes on this proposal, clearly I feel like the case you made was fairly compelling, that the fact that you put as much permeable surface in that you did, and that you're attempting to meet the stormwater requirements and the things, I think the moves you're making are in the right direction. So, and I agree. I don't think, I at least know that if I were sitting on your side of the table, which I have in the past, that probably wouldn't happen if there wasn't some compelling reason like an existing streamside ordinance. So I think you make a very good point, Commissioner Winston. But I do want to commend you for the things you've done so far. And I am very happy to hear that you're willing to continue to work with staff. That definitely makes me more comfortable that you're willing to look at the project again. And given that, I'm going to move that we table administrative item 13-4330 for 2 weeks.
Second.
I have a motion to table by Commissioner Cheshire. And,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would it be possible, if you choose to table, for staff to get some direction on what you're looking for when we come back?
Care to give some insight?
If I may, I'll sure. I think the commission has in general indicated that we might be supportive of trading some regulation here, as it were. I think that we're seeing the stream side as being, sorry, is that a bad thing to say?
Yes, that's a bad thing to say. I think
Okay.
why don't you leave it pretty open for the staff? Obviously, you made a suggestion about the easement area that they might want to look at. I know it's got some steepness in there, so they'd have to look at potential filling, something to make it more level. But obviously, the Planning Commission wants to try to see this project be accomplished, but they don't want to see it in especially the closest streamside protection or area if possible.
Is it okay for me to say that I think that in the commission's view, it seems to be more important to protect the stream side, for example, than it does to protect the parking regulations along 15th Street?
Yes, I think that's quite
right. That's the same thing that I said before, but that's what I mean. I think that we would like you to work with the applicant to see if you gave them some more flexibility in locating the parking, if they were willing to move back from the stream side. I feel like we would like to see what you could come up with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question relative?
Well, just one moment, Commissioner Hoskins.
What I was looking at, which I'll be looking at next time, is it looks to me like in the outer 25-foot, the exterior 25-foot zone or what have you, looks to me like you got about 28 parking spaces that would be affected if you got completely out of that, or completely out of the first zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Oh,
yeah,
if we got you out of the waterside zone, okay, you would have, there's about 28 spaces would be affected. And I guess what I'm looking at is, because I've been sitting here doing some doodling, and I was looking at, is it possible to move this south building along Razorback Road if there's no easements, if there's no utilities in those easements along 15th Street? Is it possible to relocate that building up there? Looks like if you do, about 12 spaces will be affected. Not having a scale ruler.
Move the northernmost building to where?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I mean, is that a possibility? Maybe.
To move it where?
There's an easement zone where we've been talking about putting parking.
Oh.
There's an easement zone along 15th Street. Okay. And I'm not asking you to answer this question. I'm asking you to think about this or whatever. Is it possible to relocate that building up there? and slide that parking south and open up that entire space for a lot of parking where the building was before.
I can answer it if you'd like me, or I cannot.
I'd rather not. Okay. And then, as was suggested earlier, is it also possible to get some parking between Razorback Road and those buildings, the buildings along Razorback Road? What I'm saying is I think there's a lot of options. Okay. You may not come up with something perfect, but you may come up with something acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's what I'm shooting for.
Okay, good. Yeah, and thanks for not answering that.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the city council would have to vacate any part of a easement area that is not being used. It's possible to do that, but I don't know if there's anything in there or not.
Yeah, the easternmost easement, I think, possibly could be, the one along Razorback Road could be, but the northernmost is a power line easement that's actually held by the power company for a transmission line.
So
you went ahead and answered it anyway, didn't you?
Sorry.
Okay, well, scratch the building idea then, okay?
But we possibly could move it to the east. May I ask the question about if we do need to get a variance from the urban residential design standards to allow parking in front of the building, is that something that we can incorporate midstream? We don't have to go back through the process.
I think so.
So if that's something in the next 2 weeks, that okay.
It'd just be a different variance.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you all for your
patience. Just a quick. Is it possible to look at the throat length on Razorback Road into the parking area and maybe get a couple more spaces down there in that entrance where by reducing the throat length?
Yeah, that's another urban residential design standard requirement of 35 feet from the right of way to the parking, and so that if that's at play in the discussion,
yeah, possible,
we can
throw that into the mix and see how.
And that will help us gain a few
there.
parking spaces that we may lose elsewhere. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? We have a motion to table administrative item 134330. Okay, you tabled. Did you table?
I didn't have anything to do with hospital.
Second, okay. So the motion was by Commissioner Chesser and second by Commissioner Hoskins. Mr. Thompson, care to call the roll?
Yes.
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Jesser.
Yes.
Pennington.
Yes.
Hanschel.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes.
And if any of you have doodles that you would like to send home with me for consideration, I'll be glad.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you supplied us with these. That helped.
I see that he never gave me one.
Next time it'd be good to have one without color on it though, so you can see the lines.
I'll get you that one.
Thank you.
I like the color.
I can't see it. It drowns the lines out to me. I can't see it.
Okay. The next item is administrative item 13-4345 for 1326 North Trinity Drive.
Table.
Hog dwellings. Staff report, please.
Good luck tonight. In conversation with the applicant earlier today, they have decided to withdraw this request.
Oh, snap. Okay.
We want to hear this. What do you mean?
That is that. So that leaves us with administrative item 13-4353, form-based code amendments.
Yes, we've got this one.
Okay.
Was she here for?
I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah,
Were
she's
you
here for me,
other
for
items?
troublemaker.
She's a taxi.
Okay.
Taxi.
Okay, here we go.
Just looking for a warm place to sit.
As background for the commissioners on this item, probably 3 or 4 years ago, the city adopted form-based zoning codes outside of the downtown area. And since that time, we have seen several projects built under some of these new zoning codes. And we've been able to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of those codes, and so we're proposing some amendments to make some of these development standards easier to implement and more clear. And so we have a really comprehensive set of code amendments here before the commission, and I won't go over everything in detail. Just to kind of summarize, we're proposing some substantial changes to all the height regulations in all the multifamily zoning districts to allow for the building height for 30 feet if structures are closer to the street, and then stepping the structures back. And we've seen some projects built where you had really tall buildings right at the street. In some settings, especially multifamily where you're adjacent to single family, we don't feel like that's appropriate. So we've looked at tweaking the building heights throughout all those zoning districts. One of the other main changes we've added is in Chapter 164. In our form-based zoning code, there's a certain percentage of the street frontage that has to be built with a structure. And so we've added in here that you can have supplementary structures to go towards that percentage. Like you can build a certain percentage of your street frontage with a masonry wall, or you can do patios, decks, or other types of, we call them supplementary elements to meet the intent of the code. And so we've added that in there. Feel like it'll make sense. We've also exempted single-family homes from the build-to zone requirements as well. And we're recommending this be tabled to allow for the public and the commission more time to review it for at least a couple of weeks. So if you have comments, issues, things like that, please email them or call us, let us know, and then we'll hopefully discuss it again in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thank you. Comments?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chester.
I'm going to make a motion, but despite Andrew's desire for emailed comments, I do want to make one quickly because it sort of came up in agenda, at least in my mind. To me, I feel like we're sending a little bit of a mixed message at this point. I know there are some good reasons to talk about stepping buildings back, but we have been saying that we want to densify and become more urban for quite some time. And a large percentage of this city is RSF4. That means that as we urbanize, in some cases, there is going to be single family housing cheek by jowl with higher density housing. I guess I'm just not as afraid of tall buildings near the back sidewalk as many in the city may be, or tall buildings in general. I feel like you kind of have to make a decision. What's more important, limiting greenfield development by urbanization, or making sure nobody's ever in a shadow? I recognize that you guys are attempting to make a compromise here, and I will read the thing more carefully and try to give you more direct comments. But I guess in general, I feel like we shouldn't be afraid to urbanize if we've decided that urbanization is what's best for the environment. And with that, I'm going to move that we table administrative item 13-4353, I believe you said for 2 weeks, Andrew, is that correct? Yes. For 2 weeks.
Second.
Last one. I have a motion to table administrative item 134353 by Commissioner Chester and a second by Commissioner Cabe.
Oh, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just realized that Mr. Cabe was going to be let out of here right after this, so I thought maybe I should just take up some more. No, I'm kidding.
Mr. Thompson, will you call the roll?
Cook. Yes.
Winston.
Yes.
Cave.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Here. Yes.
Chester.
Yes.
Pennington.
Yes.
Honchel.
Yes. Was there, okay. Was there any announcements or anything?
The subdivision committee for this week was canceled, and we do have Good news, planning commissioners, city council decided to start paying the planning commission again due to kind of the upturning of the city's budget. So we do have paperwork to be filled out by all the commissioners. So you need to get by the city's human resources office and start filling that out.
Takes about 15 to 20 minutes, just
Do
warn
we
you.
have replacement commissioners yet?
We do.
Is it one or
I
two?
believe he's-
Ron Autry said he was.
He was sitting in the audience. We, to replace Commissioner Cave, the city council did appoint somebody else. So you'll have a new commissioner in your next meeting.
Ron Autry.
He's not as much fun as you.
That it? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.